I looked up before we started. I looked up,
Hmm.
the how we're related because you're technically not my aunt. You're technically my first cousin once removed in
Yes,
American terms. I
I was
think
just gonna say,
in Filipino terms it's aunt, but in American terms it's first because you're my mom's cousin. So first
yeah.
cousin once removed, I think.
That's so funny. My other first cousin once removed is texting me right now, Hallie.
Which is kind it's kind of weird to think like why is that why are we cousins? Like what's the logic behind that?
Well, I know, and I've told that explanation that you've
Uh,
given.
uh,
I've given that to so many people where they'll say like, "Who is this?" And I can't say first cousin once removed. I just say my nephew or
uh,
my niece
uh,
because in our culture, like that's who you are to me. I'm not going to tell somebody who you're my first cousin once
yeah,
removed.
it is kind of weird because we're different generations, so it's kind of weird to look at you as a cousin, right? Or
Yeah.
Gene, that'd be kind of weird, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, and also in our culture, there's that respect factor, right? Like if there's someone that's your elder, you call them, ate or tita or kuya or, tito, whatever it is. So yeah. Anyway, so
So,
I'm just gonna say you're my nephew.
I do have a question though. Like, would you feel somewhat like offended or disrespected, like if we did just start calling you Leia? Would that make you feel somewhat like a little like uh,
It,
weird?
it would make me feel weird because we just
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
do that,
right.
and even my like my kids,
Uh-huh.
to my best friends, they're
Uh-huh.
not even blood related. They
Uh-huh.
all call them like auntie this or auntie that, or, I mean, there's no blood relation going on there at all. But I think even my peer group, my age friends, because they know me and they know our culture so well, they would feel disrespected if they called them, like my best friend, her name is Tiffany. If my kids just said, "Hey, Tiff," that would just be weird.
Yeah, because it's also an age thing too. So
Yeah.
there's a few different reasons why I'm really excited for this podcast. One, because we barely, I've known you my whole life and we barely ever speak. And two, because I just love mental health podcasts in general. And
Yes.
three, because, now we can talk about like, your parents in the Philippines. And I did want to speak about all that, so were you born in the here or were you born in the Philippines?
I was actually born in the Philippines.
Okay, so tell us about that. What was it
Yeah.
like growing up in the Philippines?
So I didn't grow up in the Philippines. So because I'm so much younger than my three older brothers, they grew up in the Philippines a little bit. I was one. So we got to San Francisco. I wasn't even a year old. So I didn't grow up there. But I mean, kind of like New York, I grew up in San Francisco where there's a lot of diversity, right? So there were a lot of Filipinos there. So my parents, when they went to the Bay Area, they ended up in the city of Oakland. And just like a lot of cultures, they found a space where there were a lot of Filipinos, and so they spoke Tagalog all the time. So I can understand the language. I speak it pretty well. I think Filipinos in the Philippines would tell you not. but um but I can understand every word, and I was just there recently and I felt pretty good about being able to communicate with everyone.
What were you there? Was there an event there? What?
So I went because my oldest is now playing professional volleyball in the Philippines.
Hmm.
So,
Wow.
well, you saw him. He's 6'6".
I saw him online too. I saw him spiking all the balls online. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he picked up a contract out there. It's his dream now just to play as long as he can play. Um, and so that's been kind of cool. So we actually are in the process of getting our citizenship recognition, everything like that again.
Wow. Wait,
Yeah,
so are you you're in the process of becoming a citizen there?
a dual. So I will keep my American citizenship and um, what do they call it? I will get back my Philippine citizenship.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that way the kids will also have their Philippine citizenship and dual citizenship.
Because
And that's actually what we're waiting for in order for Luca to play.
interesting, because you did say you were born there, so I wasn't sure. Like, are you still considered a citizen there? Like so even though you were born there, you still have to work on getting it back.
Yes, there's just a process. That's a whole story in itself. But yeah,
Right.
I was there for a long time because I was in immigration and had to go to all the different like city registries and things like that to find documents of my dad who has passed, right? And because he was born prior to World War II, all the documents are destroyed. Like there was a
Wow.
lot. Yeah,
Wow. Sounds like
yeah,
a lot of headaches.
yeah. It was a big process, but it was a lot of learning. I'll tell you.
So does your son live in the Philippines now?
Yes,
Wow.
Yeah, so he moved there. He's on contracts, and like I said, the only sad part is that he can't play in an official game yet because he needs to have that recognition.
Okay. So does he live with a relative or by himself?
Nope, he lives by himself.
Wow.
And there's a couple players and the coach live in the same building. So the company set him up, in a really nice condo. And it's his job. He practices 6 days a week, does any promotional things for them that they need to do. And um, going there was really neat because Christian, I hadn't been back in 22 years.
Wow.
Actually, I hadn't been back since Luca was in my belly. Like
Yeah,
that's the
I
last
mean
time.
it's a 19-hour flight from here anyway, so that's a big
Oh
sacrifice.
gosh.
That must
Yeah,
have
it
been
took,
amazing. So
it
you
was.
came to Manila?
So he's in Metro Manila. Yeah,
Nice.
he's there, and that's where their practice facilities are. I actually took Marco with me. He'd never been to the Philippines either, so it was kind of cool.
Nice. So wow, that's a big so that was Luca's first time there too.
He had been there earlier in the summer practicing with the national team. They did kind of just like a practice run, and then he came home and got the contract for the other pro team,
Uh,
and then ended up flying back in September. So he came home for Christmas, and then he went back.
so you must miss him like crazy, huh?
Yeah, it's really hard, especially because of this 15-hour time difference. So it's not super easy just to say, like, oh, pick up the phone. Like, you have to think, okay, wait, oh, shoot, it's only 4 o'clock in the morning over there. you know?
So you can only talk to him at nighttime. So, but you should definitely be proud. I mean, he's literally a professional athlete right now, right?
Yeah, no, he's a professional athlete. It's a really cool thing. Very, very cool.
That
And in a sport that he didn't pick up until he was like 18. He played
wow.
basketball his entire career.
Oh, he just picked that up fast.
Picked it up fast. It was those COVID years, in the very beginning, and so he was playing a lot of outdoor. I think his type of build and athleticism really lends itself to that sport. Somebody recognized it. His first kid out of the Southern Utah to even have a scholarship, first one ever to have a scholarship to go to college to play, and then went to Southern California, and then made good connections, and then the Philippine teams came to Southern California and did some tryouts.
That's incredible. So when you went to the Philippines, how long were you there? Were you there for 2 weeks? How long did
Yeah,
you stay?
16 days, 16 days.
Okay, and tell us like what did you do while you were there? Tell us what you did.
So I saw some of our family, of course, people that I hadn't seen. So they came to Manila from the provinces to say hi, have dinner, all that kind of stuff. But mainly, honestly, it was not a vacation. I was not there for vacation. So there was no island hopping, there was no beaches. It was
Wow.
literally, I was only there to make sure Luca was set up, met the company that hired him. They were amazing, got to meet the teammates, went to a couple practices, went to a couple of games, and then just spent time with him. Just had Marco and I be able to see him for a couple of weeks. It was nice.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the home country, with your family is an incredible experience. I went for the first time in 2023 with my family for Timothy's wedding, and it was amazing just being in the
Oh,
country. Even though we did get sick, it was amazing just seeing and just seeing what it's like. It's
right.
a very poor country. A lot of there were a lot of dogs walking around. I
Hmm.
remember seeing kids going through garbages. So,
Yeah.
it's also one of those experiences that make you appreciate what you have, you know?
It's yeah, for sure. Certainly. The interesting thing though about that is yes, all of, the poverty that there's a lot of areas there that aren't kept up very well, but you go to a mall and
Yeah.
and I was just completely mind blown at the like even the design. So as a designer, I go in and I look at a lot of things, especially
Uh,
commercially like that. Every restaurant in these malls were set up in like a little vignette of its own, theme or its own
uh,
aesthetic.
uh,
And I mean, if you were just living in the malls, you would think that this was a country rich with, um, infusion of money because they were able to put it in that. So I thought that was kind of a neat contrast,
were
between.
you in BGC?
I went to BGC on one of the days, yeah, but
Was that
Pasig, Mandaluyong, so all of the, and then we went to Mall of Asia, and then like the 4 or 5 big malls that were there.
nice?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love talking about the Philippines, because I've only been there once, so I still have a lot to learn, a lot to explore. We went to
Mm.
Real, we went to Quezon, we went to
Oh, I'm so glad.
yeah, yeah, and we saw as much family as we could, and I met people that I didn't even know existed, to be honest.
Right? Yeah. You're
Yeah,
like some other cousins, once removed or twice removed.
yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. So tell us what it was like growing up in Cali. Have you lived in Cali your whole life?
So I was in Northern California for 29 years. So, and I lived in San Francisco proper for a lot of my grown-up years. Went to San Francisco State University. So I went to college there. And my mom and two brothers are still in the Bay Area.
So it sounds
So,
like you never lived outside of Cali.
well, after that, then I moved to Las Vegas.
Oh, you did move to Las Vegas, yes, and then
Yeah.
okay, gotcha,
So
gotcha.
Northern California, my first 29 years, and then Vegas for 17 years, and then Southern Utah in 2017 of this year. But I'm in Vegas, like I said, twice a week usually.
Is
It's
that a
about
long?
about 2 hours.
Okay. I
I drive 2 hours in, I gain an hour because of the time difference,
uh
right? And then 2 hours back after work. But I have so many clients that I can't not take the work.
right. So, I do want to talk a little bit more about entrepreneurship, because also an entrepreneur, and
Yes.
entrepreneur, for the vast majority of entrepreneurs, our salaries are up and down and up and down and up and
Mm-hmm.
down. Have you found that in your career? Have you found that?
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. You know, I feel like I've been blessed to have to have the ability to have an entrepreneurial um, type career. So but yeah, there are those challenges. So I think as I'm learning, and I'm one of those people that says if you stop learning, like it's not a good thing if you stop learning because you stop growing, right?
Yep.
So even at this advanced age of mine, and then moving forward, if I want to always be learning. So I think one of the things that I'm learning, which I should have learned already, is with our type of business, you need to make sure that you are saving because
Yeah.
it does go like this,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
But you also have to diversify. So I have diversified my contract so that I have some that I have on retainer for every single month. So I'm not worried about that. And that's typically in my marketing company. I still have those clients that I do all their marketing, their branding, their parties, their events, and anything and all things marketing for a handful of clients that I just always keep. And then I've got my design work. That way I can build that and grow. And I have a few employees. And that way, if we don't have a lot of projects and there's a little bit of, like you said, fluctuation, right? Um, then you're okay. Like meaning you can't be solely dependent on, the next project.
You're saying don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Well, yeah, and I'm a single mom, so there is only one income in my family. So I have to really be careful not to do that.
Right. So, I don't know exactly like what you're comfortable talking about, what you're not comfortable talking about. So do you feel comfortable talking about like that, relationships? Do you feel
Sure.
comfortable? Yeah,
Yeah.
because one thing that I was thinking about before this podcast, I my ex-girlfriend, I actually saw her today, to be honest, and because she's one of my best friends, and
Oh, well, that's good. That's very
yeah,
healthy.
yes, yes, she was in the hospital, but that's a whole different story. But anyway. One thing that she used to say a lot, and she still says it every now and then, is, I'm really sad that I didn't break the cycle. The cycle meaning having kids with the same man and then staying with him. She never really got over that. She never got over like the fact that she didn't break the cycle because her mom was divorced, her mom was divorced, so she
Mm-hmm.
was always, kind of, sad and bitter about the fact that she never broke that cycle. So what would
Well,
you, go ahead, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, can you clarify, like which part of the cycle was she sad she didn't break? That she didn't leave when she needed to, or that she wasn't able to make it work? I want to make sure I'm understanding.
I think the fact that she wasn't able to make it work. That's a good question because it's a very specific question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Well, yes.
Yeah, no, it's a good question because it establishes the fact that getting divorced is not necessarily the wrong thing to do.
Correct.
I see what you're saying. So,
Yes.
because it's really really unhealthy to stay with someone just because you have kids
Correct.
together, isn't it? So I see,
Absolutely.
I understand the question. So but I mean, all she said was she was upset that she didn't break the cycle of stay having this, I guess, having the same father or staying with the same man of the father of her children. Not that she
Hmm.
regrets the divorce, but I guess maybe she would have chose a different man. I don't know. I never really. That's a good question that I never asked her, I guess.
Yeah. And that's a whole topic in itself, Christian.
Mhm.
I've had this conversation with so many people, like especially young people, because I have a lot of young people that have worked for me, so they're in that dating phase and trying to figure out, how do you choose the right person? What determines whether or not your marriage will last, you know, and all the people that I've talked to, it kind of ends up being a little bit of luck and some choice. Like, if you see the red flags or you recognize what those are, you don't stay in those. One of my long-term clients that I have in marketing, it's kind of a funny story. So he was my divorce attorney. And so we joke because, like, he had me on retainer and now I have him on retainer. So it's
Right,
been 10
right.
years, but he's become a really good friend. And so he has a lot of insight because that's what he's been in family law for, 35 years plus. Um, and he was thinking the same thing. Like, we talked about how in relationships, I feel like a lot of them don't need to end in divorce. I feel like sometimes in this day and age, we have a tendency to be selfish, if I'm just going to be honest, right? And
Uh-huh.
instead of, it's always about me, trying to figure out,
Yes.
like, why are my needs not being met in this relationship?
Hmm.
But there are a couple of occasions, or there are occasions where you really need to exit the relationship. And he confirms that my situation was definitely that situation. So
I don't know if you want to talk about it, if you don't want to talk about it.
yeah, I'm good.
Do you want to talk about, what happened or
Sure, I can talk about that. It's been a long, well, so I
uh-huh.
want to talk to you about uh, my youngest father.
Sure.
Okay, so that is it's a big topic, and there's a lot of therapy that had to go through learning and growing through all of that. But I looked at a couple of your podcasts, and you touched on it with someone, except it was their parent
Hmm.
instead of their spouse.
Hmm.
So to not beat around the bush, because like I said, I've had a lot of therapy and really good, healthy, good therapists that really helped me understand and learn what narcissistic abuse was. I had no idea. I didn't
Hmm.
even know it didn't even know it existed. I didn't know the word. And even today, I feel like people throw that word out you know, like it's the trash. They throw that word out all the time. And I really don't believe that many people are true narcissists. But when I was learning about it, there's like 10 behavioral characteristics to a narcissist, and mine had 9 of the 10. And you only have to have 4 to
Wow.
actually be a
I
true
never heard that rule
narcissist.
before. That four. I
Hmm.
never heard that.
Yep, that was from a different therapist, and because she had me go through the list, and it was like, oh hey, read these. I want to see if you recognize this, in this person. And so, yes, yes, I got to 4, and she says, you only need to get to 4. And I kept going and kept going and kept going, and so it was pretty and it was pretty eye opening, And as I've learned about it, it's even more eye opening. It's crazy, actually.
Did he have
is
narcissistic personality disorder?
He does, yes,
Oh, he's wow.
among other things. So again, I'm definitely want to make a note here. I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I can't diagnose anyone,
Mhm.
but through the therapies that I have been through, and I've been through people that have, been therapists for 35 years, and they were consistent with me, we determined that based on a lot of these traits, there was multiple personality disorder,
Wow.
um, yes, narcissistic personality disorder, and borderline. So DID, dissociative disorder, identity disorder. So I didn't know what any of that was. And it's interesting how that manipulative person, if you are not aware of it, over time can change your personality.
Yeah.
You know, your normal is here, and then 7 years later, your normal's here.
Yeah.
And then if you, and then now that I'm out of it, I went back and looked at it and I thought that normal is so abnormal, like so abnormal that other people recognized it and I didn't. It's kind of like the, have you ever heard about the frog? They always say, why does the frog doesn't die? You put him in the hot water pot because when he goes in the pot, the water's not boiling. It's lukewarm. And then it eventually is boiling. And so he dies.
So you were the frog and he was the hot
I
one.
correct. Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard that analogy. It might be an analogy from when I was younger, and you're younger than I am, so they may not use it anymore. But yeah, it was I could write a book for sure, probably a movie as well. And there have been a lot of movies written about this. But it's a gradual progression when they show you the personality traits. Like it doesn't come out right away.
Right. Well, that was going to be one of my questions. I'm willing to bet that in the beginning, he was friendly, he was courteous, he was selfless. None of those things applied in the beginning.
Well, charismatic is usually one of the characteristics, which is
Okay,
huge.
that's one of the nine.
Yes, that they're overly charismatic.
Overly charismatic. That's one of the
Yes,
nine.
because they want the attention. They want the spotlight. It's about appearances. They want to look the part of whatever it is in their head that that they've created,
They
right?
want
So there's
external validation.
correct. Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't even know where to start. There's a lot.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Because you said he was charismatic. What was he like in the beginning?
Yeah, very so narcissists are very smart about how they approach people.
Uh-huh.
They recognize if you're an empath, I'm an empath, apparently. So, and I don't know if you're aware with that. It's like we have, you know, feelings. We always consistently want to fix people, even if it's subconscious. We don't know that. We just want to help all the time. And so apparently empaths are the number one targets of narcissists.
Interesting. I've heard this theory before. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know I was an empath until, fast forward later. So yeah, charismatic, really cared about the boys because he's not my boy's father. Um, and all the things that supposedly I was missing, which was like the connection, the full family, the attention and time to my kids. That's what they give you in the beginning, or at least the appearance of. So then you're like, oh, this is so great. They care about my family. They care about my kids. Um, they're full immersion. And you've probably heard this therapist speak to this term they use. It's called love bombing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a huge characteristic of a narcissistic personality disorder is love bombing like crazy in the beginning because in their world they want to capture you as quickly as they can. So this love bombing makes you feel these emotions of attachment.
So in the beginning, it sounds like he was just trying to impress you as much as possible. He was being, overly nice with the intention of what? Like what were his real intentions?
End goal is always marriage for a narcissist.
Marriage?
Yeah, that's always the end goal for that personality disorder because that's the package. That's the end goal. Like, okay, I've got this family, the home, the cars, the career, the all of that is the picture that needs to be complete for them to feel okay.
I was just thinking more in terms of concepts. Like I think that his end goal was control.
Absolutely. Well, no, yes and no. Yes and no. It's a tactic and it's also one of the end goals. Yeah.
because I so is it safe to say that he was controlling? Is that safe to say?
That's an understatement, and I can give you examples if you want, because
Mhm.
there was everything from cameras in the home to GPS tracking to hacking of the telephone. I mean, yes.
You know, it's funny because I've heard of these things from multiple people. The cameras. This is like the fourth or fifth time I've heard the cameras in the
Yeah.
home. Like I've heard of these things. You know, it's a lot. It's way more common than it should be. You know, it's way more normalized than it should be. So, and you know, my understanding is that it generally starts at childhood. I'm not trying to justify any of his
Yeah.
actions. I'm not trying to justify, but I'm willing to bet that he probably didn't have the best parents growing up.
Correct. Right. Correct. And I have learned also it stems from childhood trauma, right?
Mhm.
And then I've had to make sure that there's a deep understanding of, okay, you can say it stems from childhood trauma, but at what point do you become an adult and you own it and you don't abuse your family? Instead, you go the opposite direction. Then at some point in your adult life, you have to make a choice based, you can't just base your behaviors on your childhood trauma.
Right. And I always like there's always this debate about like how much blame we should put on people, you know,
Mm-hmm.
especially adults, you know, and especially same thing with kids. Like a lot of people, you know, I was a school safety officer for 10 years and a lot more people were, you know, a lot more harsh on kids. In my opinion, I tend to be like very, very like it's not their fault when it comes to the kids. And it's funny because I'm actually pretty opposite when it comes to adults. When it comes to grown people, I'm very like, no, like you got to hold yourself
Own
accountable.
up. Right. Own up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no, I agree.
yeah, and it's interesting, you know, the way that you know there are a percentage of people who you know who don't agree and who think you know oh he had a messed up childhood like you know have more sympathy for him. What would you say to those people?
Well, I mean, I've definitely learned you not to judge unless you've walked in these people's shoes, right? There's different levels of
Mhm.
narcissistic personality disorder. There's all different levels, right? So I would not be the first person to jump at these people and say, hey, you're wrong because of my experience,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? I mean, I can only tell you about my experience and my narcissist,
Mhm.
right? Which is, I mean, deep rooted. And I do understand and know the parents. And yes, all of that is true. There was some serious trauma, some behaviors that were learned, for sure, and probably some psychological abuse there as well. Um, so I wouldn't say that they were incorrect, but I still stand to the point where it's unresolved, right? They always say it's unresolved childhood trauma. So then you need to get into therapy and try to resolve it.
Yeah,
That's your answer, not the controlling and the manipulating.
of course, of course. I'm willing to bet that he wasn't a very introspective man.
No, it still isn't. Yeah.
And I'm willing to bet that he puts all the blame on other people. He doesn't put the blame on himself.
1000%. That's another characteristic. There's no accountability. There's no empathy for others. And there's so many things, but that's one for sure. But the hardest part is because they actually believe their truth and their reality. There isn't the possibility of taking accountability for what they do because by the very nature of the disorder, they can't take a look at themselves. Does that make sense?
I think what you're saying is that they don't have the brain power to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's not, they're not capable of. I feel badly. Do I feel sad for narcissists? Actually, yes, because they don't even have the capability to be able to look at themselves to improve that because of the nature of the disorder.
Is that 100% true? Is that it?
I'm just, again, I'm not a
Uh,
psychiatrist.
uh,
But I'll tell you in my experience, yes,
I also wonder, like, you know, what if he would have sought help? Let's say when he was 20, 25, you know, I'm sure that he would have turned out to be much, much more controlled. Don't you
I
think?
could see that. Sure.
And I'm also willing to bet that you probably, you know, it took a while for you to set boundaries.
Yes. And that has been something that you have to practice every day. You have to keep them because they have no concept of boundaries and they will overstep. And so the minute you release one boundary, it's all over with.
And I'm
It
willing
takes
to
a long
bet,
time to reset up that boundary.
I bet that he made you feel guilty when you set a boundary.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, you are made to feel guilty about pretty much everything. Yeah,
And
pretty much everything.
do you want to give an example or
Um, sure. I mean, there's like smaller examples, like, let's see, closet had to be color coded by dry fit colors, cottons, all of that.
Mhm.
That was, the way I had to do it. And then if I didn't do it correctly, right, then they don't bring you in and say, oh my gosh, you did this wrong. Instead, they go in and they say, I know you love me and I know you want to show me that you really care about this, but I've told you this several times, like you didn't do this right. And then you say, you're sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. And it's just this downward, like this spiraling of this, guilt, 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 apologies, 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 to the point where you actually start to think it's your fault.
oh, yeah, which I was gonna ask, I there must have been a lot of self-blame and self-loathing on
Mm-hmm.
your end.
Yeah, there is. You're talking to me 6 years out now. And
Mhm.
so I'm completely, I have more knowledge, I have more tools, I have a great toolkit. I'm back to myself actually probably better than I was before, but people that knew me before and knew me during and have talked to me now will say, wow, you were like a shell of yourself. Like the lights were out, that spark that you have in your eye, like that was gone, 100% gone because you're loathing, like you just said, and you're feeling guilty. And then you get to the point where you are afraid and you're walking on eggshells and
What were you
you start to
afraid
think,
of?
any kind of confrontation about it,
Mhm.
because you're always made to feel like you're wrong.
What so if what well what would the what would the confrontation have led to that you were afraid of? Like, so for example, like, were you afraid of rejection? Were you afraid of him leaving you?
Oh, no, no. Oh, so you're to asking what were the consequences when I decided to stand up
Well,
for myself?
or what were the consequences in your head, I guess is the question. Like, what did you think would happen if you stood up to him? What did you suspect to happen? Does that make
Well,
sense?
okay, it does make sense.
Uh,
But so let me clarify. It wasn't that I was making it up in my head. It's
mhm.
that there was a history of what would happen. So it was really a consequence. It wasn't necessarily a fear out of something that I made up in my head. It was a fear based on like
History.
actual events. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I always call it getting locked in the closet, but we had a very big house. Okay. And so the primary bedroom had a very big closet. And so there would always be these conversations in the closet if I confronted him in front of people, even something very, simple, like the kids only had 10 minutes to talk to me after school. Um, and if, and then they had to start their chores. And if it became longer than 10 minutes, he would come out of the office and take the plates and like throw them in the garbage can.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I'd get a text message that says, meet me in the bedroom.
Hmm.
And then we'd go to the bedroom and then I'd get stuck in the closet for like 10 hours, literally till like 5 in the morning, talking about how I'm not being a good example, or, these are the rules. We agreed that these were going to be the rules. And if you just let them talk for one extra minute, what that's going to do. And there's a lot of projection, right? So there's the boundaries that he set in the home, whether it was the chore chart, like there was a chore chart that was very defined of all the things we had to do in the house, how many times a week, and at what time.
He
And
on the chore chart? Was he on it?
of course not. No.
Wow. So
Yeah. No, no.
how would he justify not him not being on the chore chart?
He works and makes the money. Though I was a full time, I owned that same company and worked as well.
Right.
So And he probably wouldn't have put me on the chore chart, but I could not do that to my kids to not be on it. Like I felt like I needed to do just as much as they were doing.
Mhm.
So that didn't feel good to not,
I guess the question that's lingering in my head was what stopped you from walking away?
By then I had um, a daughter,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
so if you read about narcissistic personality disorder, one
Hmm.
of the things that they like to do is to secure you and alienate you. So my example would be I lived in Las Vegas and had a lot of friends there. We moved to this town 2 hours away. Do I regret moving? No, because I love it and I made a lot of friends here. But the intention of the narcissist was to move us as far away as I could from family and friends, get married, obviously. So got married, moved this way, and then have a child. So those are three things linking you, right? Really big things. So that's one of the things. Well, probably the biggest thing was one, I have a daughter, and I didn't want that disconnect in the family if I could help it, right? So then you try to be the one to fix things. You try to be the one to make it better. You try to figure out if I approach this a certain way, will the outcome be better?
Yeah, well, I also think that it's the way that we're raised, like we were, most people, even just my age and up, I would say, were raised to believe, divorce is
Mm,
wrong. If you have
right.
kids, divorce is wrong. You must stay with them. And also, like, even when you look at like family, like you must stick with family, no walking away from family. Like I would say that for pretty much through all of history there was
Hmm.
this sort of like do not walk away from family
Right. Don't
mentality.
give up. Don't give up. You
Don't give
failed.
up on family mentality. And
Right.
now, as of maybe 10, 15 years ago, now people are starting to say, no, like this person is too toxic. I'm out of there. Even if we do
Correct.
have kids together, even if they are my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, I'm out. Like I can't deal with that. Right?
Right. Right. Yeah. And there's that line though, Christian, right there. Is it the I can't deal with that, or is it the this is so toxic and unhealthy for me? Because I think that's where the skip out might be too soon. I can't deal with this, right? Versus I might die one day. This is getting kind of crazy. I need to leave to make this healthy and safe for my family.
Hmm.
I think there's, some distinction there. Where the line is, I don't know. That line is blurred and in different places for different people.
I think it's essentially when your inner peace is disrupted. When your mental health and your inner peace is disrupted, I think that's officially when you
Yeah,
walk away.
the mental health piece is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And that's probably most of everything because then you can't be who you want to be for your kids if your mental health is disrupted, right?
Right. And obviously, and not just that, but no kid wants to see their parents fighting every day. Like that's not good for their mental health either, is it?
Right. I mean, and with my personality, there wasn't like a lot of outward fighting.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
It wasn't something like that. It was more like this, it was a silent control, silent manipulation. Like I said, there was always a text that says, come meet me over here,
It sounds
meet me
like
in
you
the
were
office.
you were pretty submissive in the beginning.
Um, yes, because you don't, well, again, a cultural thing, right?
Mhm.
Stick with it. These are the things that you need to do to make these things work. Um, so I don't know if submissive is the right word. I feel like that's a kind of a stereotype, right?
Mhm.
I mean, because if anybody knows me, like I don't, I've been independent most of my life. I make my own money. I have had my own companies.
Mhm.
I make life work. So I don't know if that's the right word, but that's where that empath comes in.
Or maybe passive, no?
There you go. Yep. Yes. I think passive is a better description.
Yeah, and I also wonder, like, was there, because I feel like there's somewhat of a connection between like uh somewhat maybe like a low self-esteem and being passive. Like basically the question is like, how was your self-esteem back then?
It was great in the beginning. And
Hmm.
then, like I said, it's like they chip away at you little
Hmm.
by little, little by little, little by little. I mean, to give you a good example, so I'm about 8 years older than 8 or 9, depending on the time of year. And
Hmm.
at one point, um, he would like say something, over and over and over again, like, how do you like your eggs? Like, please make my eggs like medium runny or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And then I would take time to make sure it was the way it was supposed to be. And then I would bring the eggs in like 6 weeks later. And then it was, what is this? And I said, what do you mean? I don't like my eggs like this. And you're like, well, no, I'm like, this is what you've said. No, I think you need to see a doctor. I think you're getting early onset Alzheimer's. I really think you need to get
Gaslighting.
checked.
Gaslighting.
Totally. Yep. I didn't know what that was either. you know,
Because we
um,
weren't taught it. We weren't taught what gaslighting was. Even me, I wasn't taught when I was a kid. What is NPD, borderline personality
yeah,
disorder?
we
We
don't know those things.
we
And I
weren't
don't
taught
think
things as a kid.
I don't think they knew it yet. Maybe some of those things didn't have labels, right? When we were younger. Yeah, no, you're 100% right.
And it
And
is
as
really, isn't it really beautiful to see like the world becoming more psychologically aware and learning what these things are and boundaries? It's a beautiful thing to see, isn't it?
it is, and it's important, and honestly, it's important for, I think, kids to learn it younger, not 30s, 40s, 50s. I mean, my daughter's school, they're teaching, they've got a counselor, and they talk about all these types of things, not the deep, like, BPD and things like that, but just
Right, right.
about boundaries and um, a lot of, I think, core, core things that are really important for their building blocks for them. And I really am glad to hear that they do it young.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, what I believe is that psychology should be taught from every grade from sixth grade to 12th grade. I believe that.
Hmm.
I really believe that, even if it's just basic stuff. So I
Yeah.
did want to talk about what do you think is the difference between Filipino parents and American parents? What do you think is the difference? You probably have a much better answer than I do.
Filipino parents versus American parents.
Yeah.
That, that's a hard one. I could say all the basic stereotypical things, right? Like super stereotypical. Like Filipino parents are so strict, right? American parents just let you do whatever you want. But I don't know if I see that always. I think I see a little bit of both. And again, I grew up in the States. I was the last one. I'm 6 years younger than my youngest brother, so they were treated differently, I know it, than I was. Things were a lot more lenient, because of age. They were getting older, they're probably tired. They've gone through three boys already and
Yeah.
had to discipline
Yeah.
all of that.
Mhm.
But I want to flip this and tell you what I see that's super positive that I feel like has been great with my parents and just our family actually. I love the Filipino parents' sense of family
Mhm.
and of connectedness. I feel like our family does a really good job of trying to make sure we all know who we are, right?
Yep. Yep.
And we
Yep.
have these family reunions. We're always looking forward to the next family reunion,
We
whether
always
it's the
look for an
90th.
excuse to have a family.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Mhm.
this one is my mom's, right? I'm planning her 90th birthday,
Uh-huh.
which I'll ask you later. I want to see if
Uh-huh.
you're coming or not. Anyway, so there's that. There's the weddings. There's, even sadly in funerals, anniversaries though, and birthdays, and baby blessings, like all the different things. I feel like we have always, and I think that's our parents' parents. So your Lola, Lola, Lola. I think they did a great job of being good examples of how important that is and how you feel still connected. I mean, look, we're still connected. We haven't even spoken in a long time. I saw you in New York not too long ago, but if you put something on Spotify or if you throw something up on social media, I'm like, yeah, that's my nephew,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that is something that's more prevalent, if that's fair to say, growing up with Filipino parents than maybe American parents
You're saying that Filipino parents are more family oriented?
by nature. I think so, and by culture. Hmm. And that sense of community where back in my day, even you're younger than I am, but that whole, like, it takes a village to raise your children, you
Yeah.
know, your titas and like your aunts, uncles, everybody, they were part of what molded you. Now, when our family immigrated here, as you know, like you guys are in New York, we've got West Coast, we've got, you know, um, Virginia, Ohio. So we can't really be raised by our aunts and uncles because we don't live geographically as close as, you know, maybe we would have if we all stayed in the Philippines. But social media, I think, is making that smaller, right? We're a little bit not as far away from each other because we can connect in a different way. But I would say that that would be the main difference. I think that I grew up where family is so important, and maybe that is also part of the downfall of, hey, I stayed when I probably should have left sooner, right? Than 7 years later. You know, I took 7 years of abuse instead of 3 or 4, and you stay because you want that sense of family.
So it sort of sounds like there are disadvantages to being too family oriented.
Yeah, actually, as that was coming out of my mouth, I was realizing, okay, wait a minute. You know, I almost proved 2 points there, right? Like, yes, it's great, but yes, it could also be detrimental.
Yeah, well, what I would say is that we
Yeah,
should be family oriented, but at the same time, once it reaches the point where a family member is affecting your mental health and your inner peace, then that's when you gotta go. Because the thing is, you can't count on anybody changing. You never really want to have the mentality of, oh, let me try to change them or let me wait for
right.
them to change. You can't count on that, can you?
No, you can't. That's one thing I've learned that my entire life, that
Mhm.
you cannot count on that. And you can love them from afar,
Yeah.
and you can choose to, you know, wish them well and hope that they have a good, you know, journey on their learning and growth, but you can take yourself out of the situation.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So do you have three siblings in total?
Yes,
And
three
that
Cleas.
and that yeah, all men.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was speaking to a woman a few weeks ago, and it was a similar situation. She grew up with three brothers,
Yeah.
and she said that she often felt left out. Like they would play soccer and they would leave her out, and they were constantly leaving her out of activities. Did you sort of feel that way growing up?
Yeah, I did, but you know, I don't blame anybody because there was also just the generational gap. Like my oldest brother is 12 years older than I am, or 10, you know, 11, and then nine, sorry, I think it's 11, 9, and then 6. So we didn't go to high school together. You know, I was kind of an only child in my world, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I really felt like I did get left out of a lot of things. However, as we got older and I was more like in my 20s, then the gap just closed. You know, then I was
An
singing
adult.
karaoke
Yeah.
like 4 nights a week with my oldest brother and his friends, and they're all 11, 12 years older than I am. So, you know, and then today, I think I talk to my brothers. One of them I talk to like 6 times a day, just whenever we are not doing anything.
Well,
And
that's because
then,
when you're 20, now you're all adults. But when you're
yes,
10, there's this sort of like
huge gap.
maturity. Right, right.
Yeah,
It's
the
so
gap closes. Yeah. And then when you get older and then you all are married and then you have kids and then you have kids that are teenagers, that gap just gets, you know, smaller and smaller and smaller. And they could literally be the same age as you, you know. Um, so yeah, I felt left out in the beginning, but that closed, like you were saying, like in my 20s. I didn't feel like that anymore.
and I'm sure that growing up you had a bunch of friends, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did in my own age group. And then high school, my parents kept me so busy. I was doing pageants and on the dance team and all that. So I didn't have time to be thinking, oh gosh, am I getting left out? Like, no, I didn't have time for any of that. I was always doing something.
Yeah, so that's also a question that I had. What were your parents like growing up?
To me or to my brothers? Because
Let's
I
say,
don't think it was the same.
well, could we talk about both?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the comments I would make that I think a lot of people would agree if they're in the same situation is maybe their view of what the family looked like is different than my view of what the family looked like because I had a different experience being the youngest with all my siblings. And also, like I said, and I'm experiencing this now at my age, I'm more lenient as I'm getting older because you're a little tired, for one. And two, you don't see like, oh my gosh, if they fall off the bed, it's the end. It's not like that. I've had one that fell off the bed. They're fine. Like, you know, so your parenting style is totally different later as well. That's what I think, at least. Um, you'll get,
You're saying by the time they got to you, they were more nonchalant. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think whatever things that they might have been afraid of with my older brothers, they'd experienced those already, realize they're fine, it's okay. And so and I couldn't tell you an example because I'm not, I wouldn't have remembered what my parents were thinking about me at the time. But if, let's say, a similar situation came up, like, oh, I stayed out too late, or they're just not as they weren't as mad about it as they were with my brothers. They were like, just, are you okay? I mean, and now we have phones. You're on phones with your kids. You can track them. You can talk. It's a whole different thing, right?
Well,
You
I was
don't,
also, a little bit surprised with that answer because I figured, you were the only girl. So I figured
right?
it would be more strict with the only girl. That's usually how it is.
Yeah, that's funny that you said that because most people will say like, "Oh, you must have been so spoiled, and it must have been so hard because you were the only girl." No, totally not. It was, at least in my experience, it wasn't that way. I didn't feel like that at all. And again, it could go back to the fact that they were smart, my parents, and I was in so many activities that I didn't have time to go to, like high
Yeah.
school parties. I couldn't get in trouble. Like
You
I
were
didn't have
working.
time. Yeah, exactly.
What did they do for a living?
So my dad was an engineer for the city of Oakland, and then my mom worked for the city of Oakland as well as an administrative assistant, and they worked on the same floor for 35 years. And my dad drove her to work every single day and drove her home every single day, and like, yeah, and they stayed married.
Did,
Like,
did they meet? Oh, they met in the Philippines, obviously.
oh yeah.
Do you know the meeting story? Do you know how they met?
Let's see. I know the courting story. It's pretty funny, actually. So my dad, I don't know if you've ever heard, but Tito Alex, Lolo Alex for you. My dad was a really good singer.
Uh,
Really.
I don't know if I
Do you
ever
remember hearing that?
I
He
don't
was a
remember
really
I
good
don't remember
singer.
if I ever heard him sing.
No, you didn't. You were too little. He passed
Mm,
13 years ago, you
mhm.
know. Um, and he was sick for many years before that, so he wouldn't have been singing. But when he was younger, we could not leave a party, and we went to a lot of parties because they played mahjong, and all the families would get together in the communities, and all of their friends, and all the kids would fall asleep underneath the tables while the parents were playing mahjong. But we couldn't leave a party without someone saying, "Alex, you can't leave until you sing. You need to sing us a
Uh,
song first."
uh, uh.
So I have those really good memories, really fun memories of that.
Yeah, so it sounds like, you've always had a pretty great relationship with your parents.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, and I'm sorry. I know I didn't answer your actual question. So when my dad was courting my mom,
Mhm.
apparently he had gone to their dorm and threw a rock at the window and
Really?
sang to her. Yes.
Wow, it's like
And
Romeo and Juliet, huh?
yeah, exactly. And so, all the girls were like snickering, like, oh my gosh, Alex is here. And, they open the window and she stands there. And my mom tells me he got the words wrong.
What song did he sing?
I don't even remember. I'll have to ask her again. That's a good question.
Well, you know what's funny because I feel like nowadays, I feel like that wouldn't work nowadays. You know,
No, it wouldn't.
now it's like
No.
harassment, I feel like it's cute back then and now it's like you'll get arrested, you know?
Yeah, now it's creepy, right?
Yeah,
Creeper. Like,
yeah.
I think that, yeah, the closest anybody got to that was that movie. What's that famous movie where the guy puts the
Radio boombox.
boombox
Box.
on his head and he's, plays the favorite song to the girlfriend
Was
and
that
then they get
Adam
back together.
Sandler or no?
No,
Was
it wasn't Adam Sandler. Was it Rudd?
I don't
I can't
remember
remember.
who it was, but I've seen I think I've seen it multiple times
You
actually.
have, because it's
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
it's like a epic scene,
Right, right.
Yeah. So I think that's the last time anybody could get away with that, something like that.
So, yeah, so it sounds like you had a pretty good childhood overall, it sounds like.
Yeah, I do. I don't have any memories of there being anything negative. I mean, my memories of my parents were, and I think this is where I learned my work ethic because I work a lot. I work hard. I know how to pick myself up off my feet. The couple times that life has thrown some big curveballs at me,
Mhm.
you know, because my parents showed me how to work. But at the same time, they were always, I don't remember a weekend where we didn't do something together. Like
Mm.
we always went to the park, or I was always at the bowling league. My dad was in a bowling league. So every Friday night, he'd take me to the bowling league. I remember doing homework. He was a realtor at night. So
I did
he
hear about
in
that. Yeah. My
engineer by
mom just told
day,
me that the other day. She just told me
a
that.
yes, a realtor by day, engineer by day, realtor by night.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad just having like this amazing personality. And so everybody wanted to buy homes from him because he was Alex, like best personality ever. Like just he had friends everywhere. Everywhere I turned, there was like 600 people all the time. So, and then my mom, I kind of feel like the same way. She's so fun. People are always um, complimentary of her. And obviously she's in such good health and I'm so happy and, hope that can continue as long as possible. But they just gave me a good sense of what family is like and all the different aspects of it, the working hard, the making sure that your family was doing activities together. And I don't think we had a lot of money. We were immigrants. I know my parents worked hard, but somehow we did Knott's Berry Farm and Universal Studios. We would go cherry picking. We would have family events all the time with all their friends on the weekends. And I just felt like we were just always doing things that brought joy and human connection all the time.
Yeah. Well, also remember the cost of living was much lower back then, so I feel like it was easier to go to
Yeah,
the world and to do those things. But it sucks because I only met your dad maybe once or twice. I was a kid, so I really
yeah,
now I'm wishing that I had got to know him as an adult.
I know. Yeah. And he was always joking around too. My brothers and I are always talking about when I say joking around, kind of like a TV sitcom. Like my mom would open a cabinet and there'd be like a rubber hand, in there, or the microwave oven, there'd be a big spider. Like he just always had something, was always pranking my mom.
Yeah, he sounds like an amazing father. So yeah, so I have like two more questions. So
Yes.
it sounds to me like, your confidence sort of went like this. Like it was good before and then went it down and then it's now back up. So
Hmm.
I guess my question is, and this is in my opinion a very important question, how do you take someone with a lower confidence and help them come back up?
That is an important question because with the situation that I went through, I'm finding that I'm meeting a lot of people. Like I have friends that will say like, "Oh, hey, Leah, will you talk to my friend? She's going through the same thing you're going through, right?"
Mhm.
It's kind of birds of a feather, right? Like if I can help somebody learn from my like what I had gone through, then that's important to me because
Mhm.
there has to be something that you got out of it, and that's something that you can give and something that you can use to serve others, right? Or
Mhm.
else or else you just feel like, oh my gosh, why did this happen to me?
Right.
Instead of like, hey, this happened for a reason. We all got through it, and I'm able to help people now because I am in their shoes. You know, people need someone to be able to identify with what they're going through, and you really cannot. I'll tell you, if there's one thing I want to leave you with is until you have been in a narcissistic situation, you really don't understand what that's like. So
Mhm.
people that have truly been in that really have an understanding of each other.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, so back to what you were saying or your question. So I'm gonna just put this out there, but I think my faith is probably one of the biggest things that has gotten me through everything. Um, I believe that there is a higher power, and because of that, I glean a lot of power from that, and that I I am always hopeful, and I know there's joy, and I know He's given me the ability to get past things and the tools around me to get stronger and healthier. So I think, like let's say to somebody else, how would I tell them like, hey, you're going to be okay, like you can get through this. We live this life to go through hard things to grow, right? We should always be growing, always be growing. And so when I do talk to some of these peers that are going through what I went through,
Mhm.
I always tell them like, you will get yourself back. In fact, you're not just going to get yourself back, you're going to get better
Mhm.
because this is an experience you didn't have before, right? That now you have, and now you're going to grow from. So you can't just be, you can't go from here, like this was me, you happy, confident or whatever. And then you have this experience. You don't just come back to that spot. You actually grow. So
Mm-hmm.
you go here, you're here, and then you're here,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to be willing to take the steps. Um, I think therapy is huge. I think the whole mental health piece is so important, right? So, so important. And I think the other thing I learned too is to be okay taking help from those around you. It's something that I had a really hard time doing before. But when you're in that situation and there are people that wanting to reach out to you and show you love and give you help, take it. Like, take it. It's not just a blessing to you, it's a blessing to them too. Like, let them help you because they really want to help you.
Do you know the song Help by the Beatles?
I probably do.
Yeah. Oh, well, I
Oh
love
yeah,
that
yeah,
song.
yeah, yeah. I do, I
Well,
do. It's a faster song,
he
right?
says something like, "When I was younger, I didn't really ask for help, and now I ask for help more." I probably butchered it, but I do think that the older I get, the more I realize that we do need each other, whether it's
Yeah.
for advice, whether it's for encouragement, whether it's for financial situations. Like we do need each other one way or
Yes.
another. So you did mention God, and I there's one question that I think about a lot, a
Mm.
lot. And you did answer it to a certain extent, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why does God allow suffering?
To grow.
Mm,
Yeah. Again, I think it's a hard concept, I think, for younger people, because obviously I have kids that are in their 20s, right? That have been through hard things, and they will ask the same question. Like, I don't understand, like, why does this have to hurt, or why do I have to go through this to grow? Like, we have to, at this age now, that I'm at, like, I could see all the levels of growth. It's kind of like, if you I want to give you a visual of, like, um like the water lines or petrification on wood, and you can see all the different things that it's gone through, right? These
mm,
compact, and you
mm,
like visually can
mm.
see these lines of growth. And over time, we're like, those are living things. We're living things. Like, that's what we go through to get to the places that we are. I mean, how am I ever going to be that old lady in the corner that gives advice to my grandkids if I didn't grow?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, like
So,
let's just say that you have a granddaughter who is dealing with a narcissistic boyfriend. Like
mhm.
how would you give good advice if you didn't go through what you went through?
Exactly. Right. The perfect example, whether it's that or some other experience you've had, how can you give this advice to the future generations if you don't have firsthand experience?
Hmm. So my very last question was, do you have any tips for entrepreneurs?
Oh, um,
Sorry for the topic change.
yeah, well, that's okay. We're just going back to where we were in
Yeah,
the beginning.
yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. For entrepreneurs, yes. So, gosh, that's a last question, but there's a lot of answer to that question. So, one, believe in yourself. Um, Two, really carve out your niche. I think and I've learned this too, and I'm still learning this. It's hard to do too many things, you know, narrow it down to the few things that you are the best at. Third, educate yourself.
Yep.
There are so many resources now, right? YouTube. I mean, you kids like write papers using YouTube and AI. I mean, we had the Encyclopedia Britannica, and like, the information we had to get was literally in a book. There was no internet when I was, growing up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so now I'm an entrepreneur in this new world with all this technology that you young people have, that you have a better understanding of it even than I do. And I feel like I'm struggling learning it, but I am constantly having to learn and grow. So, good example is when I started my interior design business. I don't have any formal education in interior design, right? I just have all the years of creativity and all the different experiences and traveling and the different jobs that I had. So then I had to get down and take classes online, figure out, colors, and, you know how is a home built. Like, you just have to constantly educate yourself in your field and to stay relevant, right? And to also be okay with the rainy days, like you were saying, like your
Yeah.
perfect example, an
Yeah.
entrepreneur is going to go through this, and to expect that that is the cycle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Expect it. And so when you get to the low, don't give up. Don't give up. You just learn from it, figure out what you need to do to shift, whether it's financial help or, again, more education, or you change your business model or whatever it is. There's a sign in my office that I had to actually look at for myself the other day, and it says, uh, what does it say? If the plan doesn't work, change the plan, but never change the goal.
Interesting.
And I literally had a little bit of a, tough, I'm trying to do a little transition and grow my business a different way. And I was a little frustrated. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Business has been so great for a few years. How do I shift into the next phase? And I looked up and I just thought, oh my gosh, that's why I have the sign there. Yeah, don't give up and change the goal. You just got to change the plan.
It's really interesting because business, you can learn a lot about life in business. So for example, when you said, to expect the ups and downs, right? What I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking in my head was, it's the same thing with life. I was just listening to Dr. K the other day, and he was saying, even though younger people have many advantages over older people, younger people tend to be healthier and younger and more energy and this and that. One thing about older people is that older people have accepted the bittersweetness of life more. A lot of people in their 80s or 90s
Mm-hmm.
have reached the point where they are more okay with the concept of suffering and the concept of life's fluctuations, whereas younger people often have the mentality of, I can't stand suffering, or I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. You understand what I'm saying?
1000%. Yeah. I was actually talking to my boy's grandma, and I'm still very close to everybody in that family. And she is now in her early 80s, maybe, I think. And we were talking about parenting and parenting kids that are 20 and 22. And I remember when I met her 25 years ago or whatever it was, like she was always so worried about these different decisions that her kids were making, and not just worried, but like so involved that she would feel like she had to say something about it. And so I had asked her, I said, how do you do that? And now, 30 years later, or read she looked at me and she goes, you know what? It really just is all okay. They're going to be fine. Like it was just very nonchalant, and like, I've watched so much life. This is coming from her. Like, I've seen so much life, and we don't always make the right choices, but you have to let your kids be on their own journeys. And so she just kind of, like you were saying, when you get older, you just kind of take a step back and you're looking at life different, from a different perspective, literally, physically from a different place, right? You're not here and involved. You're here as an observer. And now that you've been through all of your changes and growing and ups and downs and everything, you're just now watching your offspring or their peers kind of go through the same thing. And because you're here and you've gotten through it, now you can just watch instead of try to, like, micromanage it.
It kind of reminds me of the term helicopter parenting in a way.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yes, no, for sure.
so it sounds like, in the beginning, you couldn't stand the thought of any sort of anything going wrong. You couldn't
Hmm.
stand the thought of anything going wrong, which, even though I don't have kids, I can see myself like that's one reason why I am not rushing because I wouldn't be able to stand the thought of like something going wrong. Where it sounds like when you're, the older you get, the more you're like, things can go wrong. Things can go
Yes,
wrong, and that's okay.
I'm going to rephrase that. Things will go wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Things will go wrong. And it's more than okay. It's more than okay. That's how you learn and you get to the other side, and how we become better.
And I think that's a great takeaway. Things will go wrong, and that's okay. I think that's a good spot to stop right there, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
So I kind of ran out of questions. Is there anything else you want to say, or?
No, I mean, I think we covered a lot. I
Yeah,
mean, I know the hard nuts and like the hard stuff that we talked about in the middle there, there's so much context around it, you know what I mean? But I think we touched on the most, kind of just like the important concept part of it, like conceptual things. Um, Everybody's story around those conceptual things may look different. right? But the core of those things are the same.
We can always have a part two if you have more to say. We can always
Oh
have a
gosh,
part two anytime.
absolutely. I'm here.
It was so nice talking to you, Tita.
You too. Take care.
All right, have a good one. Take
Okay,
care.
bye.